This video is a continuation of the first strong acid, strong base titration video, and it's going to go over the last part of this question, how to find the pH when 40 milliliters of base are added. And so just to refresh, we have the scenario, HCl is titrated with NaOH, and it takes 35.6 milliliters to get to the equivalence point. So really what we're finding is how to get the pH after equivalence. And so you might not be asked, exactly 40 milliliters, but just how do you find the pH after the equivalence point? It could be any volume, and the steps you take are still going to be the same. And so let me switch to a different piece of paper. How I would solve this is I know that after the equivalence point, there is no acid left. There's only excess base or excess OH. Get to the equivalence point, which was 35.6 milliliters. All of this OH was neutralized by the acid. And so how much is left over? The amount of base you added total, so the 40 milliliters, and you subtract how much you needed to get to the equivalence, or the equivalence volume. Okay, and so when I subtract that, I have 4.4 milliliters of OH excess. Now, we can't find pH from a volume. We can't even find pH from OH. We first need to go ahead and change this to moles. You always need to go into moles. So how many moles of OH was this? Well, the base that we added was 0.5 molarity. And so my moles of OH would, that's what I'm looking for, divide it by the volume of excess OH. 4.4 milliliters is 0.0044 liters. 0.5 times 0.0044 means that you had 0.0022 moles of OH excess. I'm trying to find the pH. So I need to get this into molarity. Molarity is moles divided by liters. And like before, you need to think about what's the total volume right now. It has to be the total volume. It's not just 0.5, because once you add that base into the flask, there's other stuff in it, and so the molarity goes down, it gets diluted. And so thinking about what do we have? Well, your little flask started out with, here's your titration, you're setting it up, there's the drops of base coming in. You had 25 milliliters of acid, and then we have added 40 milliliters of base. So really the volume in this is 65 milliliters at this point. So we need to divide it by the total volume, 0.065 liters. And that gives me my molarity of OH is 0.0338 m. And this again was a strong base. When you have a strong acid or a strong base, you don't need to make an ice table or anything to get pH. You just negative log it. But because that's my molarity of OH, when I negative log it, that's not going to give me pH. It'll give me POH. So negative log of 0.0338 is 1.47. pH plus POH equal 14 when you're at room temperature. You can always assume these problems are at room temperature unless you're told otherwise. So to get pH, you just subtract this from 14. The pH would be, what is that, 12.53. So this would be how you would solve any problem past the equivalence point. Again, you need to take the amount total OH added, subtract the amount that you needed to get to the equivalence, and that leaves you with the excess. Using your molarity of base, you solve for moles of OH from the volume of excess. That will tell you how many moles are excess. And then you divide that by the total volume of the flask, get your molarity, and go from there. I hope this video was helpful.